A great battle is afoot. Good versus bad, light versus darkness, wizards versus trolls. A mortal conflict between two irreconcilable forces in which one will vanquish the other and ascend to supremacy. Except there really isn't. The battle around hybrid versus native is a chimera. And we need to reframe that debate because it's really about using the right tool for your team and for the job at hand. And there are tremendous advantages to each platform. HTML brings to the table the ability to reuse the skills of your team. It uses a markup language and has great control over style. Probably the attribute of HTML that's most often mentioned is that it uses open standards, which gives you tremendous broad portability. Native, of course, brings its own advantages. Certainly optimal performance, access to platform functionality that may not be available to an HTML application, and a truly optimized user experience that perfectly matches the platform. Hybrid, in some ways, offers the best of both, providing exposure to the capabilities of the platform to your HTML. Importantly, it offers you a path to move from your HTML application to mobile, and then from there as a stepping stone to native applications. And Xamarin, to some degree surprisingly, offers a hybrid solution. This is the place where I would switch from slides to my demo. But experience says that when you do live coding, invariably you make a typo, and then you get to have the great game that I call debugging by mob. So I'm going to do a lot of my demo utilizing the dread PowerPoint. But we'll see if we can use it in a way that is geek-friendly. This is an application that I built in ASP.NET MVC. It's a straightforward ASP.NET MVC application. It allows you to manipulate photographs or actually just scroll through your photographs. You could imagine using it for a stock photo application or for your own photos. And when you click on one of the photos, you see a larger image and details about the photo. There is nothing special about this ASP.NET MVC application. It's pretty much straight out of the box. We have a models folder, a views folder, and a controller folder. And then we have a data folder for accessing the database. Let's start in the models folder with the photo object. Now, can you see that code? Yes. Hearing no objection, I'll continue. The photo object is exactly what you would expect, a POCO, a plain old CLR object. It's just a C# class. It defines a number of properties, but there are no real surprises here. Each of these properties has the code to support the iNotify property changed, as you would expect. So nothing special. The one thing you might notice, those of you with very good vision, is that the favorites is not marked as a Boolean, it's marked as an integer, and that's an artifact of SQLite, where there is no support for Booleans. We use 1 for true and 0 for false. The controller is a straightforward MVC controller. Call this photo controller, and it has two methods, show all photos and show photo details. So once again, a straightforward MVC application. The CS/HTML is exactly what you would expect. Let me zoom in on that for you just a little bit. You can see that that is straightforward CS/HTML. And we play out the page, and we have a footer. And once again, this is straightforward CS/HTML with URL actions that take you back to your controller. That's not what I wanted to do. That left the, let's see if we can get back without too much assistance. There we are. Unfortunately, I have to do all this at a distance. There we go. So there's our other CS/HTML file, which you can see is, again, straightforward. This is our starting point. To get to our data, we're going to define an interface, implement that interface, and create a base class called SQLite Base Repository. SQLite Base Repository is simply going to identify the path to our SQLite database and the name. Our interface defines our two methods. And then the implementation for that is just as you would expect. We open a connection, we set up our query string, and we return either a collection of photos or an individual photo. So we start out with an ASP.NET MVC application that has nothing put into it to make it portable into Xamarin. It is a vanilla MVC application. How do we migrate that to be a mobile application? We want to maximize reuse. And we are going to achieve total reuse of the model, exactly as it is. We are going to achieve total reuse of the view, the CS/HTML files, by adding one line to each file. And while we can't reuse the controllers, we can reuse the logic that's captured in the controllers. This is what the application looks like as a web application. This is what the application looks like as a mobile application. And I happen to be showing the iOS version, but it runs equally well on Android and Windows Phone. You click on one of the choices, and you go to the details page, just as you did with the web application. So how do we build this? We start, I chose to start in Xamarin Studio. My solution has 4 projects, one for Android, one for iOS, and a project that I import from Xamarin called Portable Razor, which does all the magic for me. And then I have my PCL, which serves as my core class, where I will write the great majority of my code. The Portable Razor is available on GitHub, and you'll include that in any application that you're importing from an MVC application. And you achieve full support for Razor syntax by doing so. My Xamarin Studio solution has, as I said, a portable class library, portable stock photo, which has the same structure as my MVC application. So I have a models folder, a views folder, a controllers folder, and once again, a data folder. If we look at the model, you can see that the photo class is absolutely identical. Copy and paste from my MVC application into this application. Similarly, if I look at the controller, while I'm not able to bring the code in, I am very much able to bring in the logic. And so the methods map one-to-one, and the functionality is the same, and there's a very distinct pattern in which I define the method, and in that method I retrieve the data from the database, and then I assemble that into a string that can be presented. When we turn to the view, to the CS_HTML, it is identical, copy and paste from the CS_HTML in my MVC application. The one distinct difference is this one line, inherits portable razor view base. That's the only thing I have to do to the entire CS_HTML file to make this work. Otherwise, this file is exactly identical, including the URL actions that take me back to the controller. And the same is true of my other view. The data defines a data access, and in this case it has two methods, defining the signature and return value. The implementation has an interesting challenge. SQLite has to be in a different directory for iOS and for Android. The solution for that is to put a file, dataaccess.cs, into one of your platforms, let's say iOS, and link that file, that exact same file and same code, into the other, into Android. But notice it's a partial class. All of the implementation details are in this partial class. So we see that we get a connection, we assemble our SQL statement, execute that SQL statement, copy the values into our photo object. That is all identical across platforms. The other part of the partial class is specific to the platform, and all that does is identify the directory for the SQLite file. So this becomes very straightforward. The additional work that you have to do is to create a class that inherits from UI view controller and instantiate your controller and register it. So that's a little bit of extra that is required to tie this all together. When you've done so, you then have an iOS application that works identically to your web application, and you have an Android application and a Windows Phone application, all with the same code base, based on your MVC application. So where are we? We have very quickly, and with very little new code, migrated our web application to be a hybrid mobile application. We have shared code across our mobile platforms, migrated the functionality of our web application, reused the CS_HTML exactly with one additional line, reused our model exactly, and reused the logic of our controller. But now we have a Xamarin application, and we can go beyond simple migration. Now, because we have a Xamarin application, we can reach out to take advantage of native code. So, for example, we can use platform-specific code. It turns out that iOS has great support for Twitter. I would like to take advantage of that in this application that started out as an MVC application. Adding native code allows me to leverage that native support for Twitter on iOS. And I can do that either by creating an interface or by creating a base class that I'll inherit from in my iOS app. And now let's look at a real demo. So we will bring up Xamarin Studio. And I hope maximize that. There we go. And I'm wishing that I could see that on this screen, but I can't. So I will do it long distance. We have our 4 projects. And in our core project, we are going to define a controller which is called Tweet Controller. This is going to serve as the base class. And it will be overridden, the methods in it will be overridden in any platform that wants to reach out to Twitter. The key method here is the virtual method tweet. And we can put in a default functionality. In this case, my default functionality is to just pop up an alert that says we haven't implemented it. So if I don't want to implement this on Android, but I do on iOS, that's very straightforward. Let's go to the iOS project. And in the iOS project, I'm going to go to my controller. And here you see that I have implemented iOS Tweet Controller. In iOS Tweet Controller, the only significant work that I have to do is to override that method tweet. And here, despite the fact that what I started with was a mobile application and brought in that code without changing it, I now can use native code. Of course, I'm still in C#, I'm still in Xamarin, but here I can go into my native iOS code and check to see if Twitter is available, set up my tweet, set up my completed action for what to do after the tweet is sent, and present the Twitter screen. So now, in that application that I brought over from mobile, I'm talking directly to iOS's native code. And if we switch over to the phone, I'm hoping we'll switch over to the phone. There we go. Here is the same application, live this time. If I tap on foliage, I get to the details as we saw. But now I've added in my CSHTML a footer that has a button that says tweet this. When I do, and let me go out of airplane mode so we can really do this. Let's go to here and turn off airplane mode. I set that so we wouldn't be interrupted. Go back to my application. When I click, go away. When I click tweet this, not you, don't go away. Close. Yes, well, one of the problems with turning off airplane mode. Oh, my. We've all been there. When I click tweet this, a Twitter message comes up with the photo captured. I can set my account. I can set my location, except where we are, I'm not getting that. And I can say, hello from, don't you love the new keyboards? From Evolve, exclamation mark. And then I can click post. And with any luck, that will go out to Twitter, and you can find it on your phone. tablet, computer, etc. Let's switch back to the computer, please, to the presentation, which I believe I can get over here. There we are. So, just to quickly review, we started with an ASP.NET MVC application. We reused the CSHTML. We reused the model. We reused the logic of the controller, created a mobile application. That's a Xamarin mobile application, first class like any other, and therefore we're able to reach out to the platform-specific code. So now what? How do you replicate that? I recommend following a simple recipe, which I will, of course, make available with the slides and on my blog at blogs.falafel.com. To go from an MVC application to a Xamarin hybrid application, I suggest that you start with an existing one, either the one you just saw, which we'll make available, or with Portable Congress, which is available on GitHub from Xamarin. With that starting point, all you need to do is swap out the CSHTML with your CSHTML files. Swap out the model classes with your model classes, and then edit the controllers to point to your classes. Finally, you will want to edit hybrid view controller, which will be there already for you, going into the view did load method and updating that to instantiate and register your controllers. And you will want to update your data access for SQLite, of course. And that's it. Those steps are fairly straightforward and, most important, repeatable. We have created a number of resources where you can get more information about this, because in a 45-minute presentation, this goes by pretty quickly. It's a lot of information to integrate. A little self-promotion. Falafel University, which is at falafel.com/fu, no laughing, offers a wide variety of courses on Xamarin, but also on many other topics, such as Kendo and Sitefinity and many other things. Xamarin University is an incredibly powerful resource, and I've created a number of resources with the shortcut jliberty.me that will take you to Xamarin resources and blog posts. So you may want to snap a photo of that or just look at the slides once they're posted. And finally, we are offering a free ebook which covers this topic and a good bit about Xamarin Forms at jliberty.me/ebooks/xforms. And note that on these short URLs, capitalization matters. I have allocated a good deal of time for questions, so please don't disappoint me and come on up, or we can always break early. But if you do have questions, I'm happy to answer anything that comes up, usually by saying, I don't know, I'll get back to you, or please ask someone from Xamarin. Hi.
Hello. Well, I have one question. Usually we do a website having in mind that we will have a lot of users. Okay. When we convert that to one application in the way that showed us, my database that was working for a lot of people.
Can I ask you to get just closer to the mic? Maybe you could lift it up.
Better?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. That database that was made for a lot of users now is working with only one user. So in this case, we have a lot more of work to do, right? Because it's not the same application. Okay?
Well,
that's right. We were showing an application where we had a lot of photos, but
yes.
In a real-world website, we would have my photos, her photos, and everyone's photos. Mm-hmm. So when I brought this to my mobile, I had only the photos that I had. So we have more things to change, right?
Yes. Yes, if you're going to use a local database, but of course you're absolutely free to go out to a web service or to a database that's out on Azure. It depends on what you're building. If what you were building was an individual photo collection, then that would have been true in the web, and it's still true in the phone. If what you were building was a stock photo selection that you were getting out of a database off in the cloud, then rather than doing what I did, which was using a local database, you would just go to the same stock photo and bring it down to the phone. There should be no difference whatsoever.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So the example you gave is great if you have pages that go back to the server every time.
Yes.
What if you have like a single page app, but you still want to have the native experience between screens? So do you have any best practices of communicating back from inside of the web view back to the app and vice versa?
That's an excellent question. And the answer is that it's fairly early days. These libraries are relatively new. And what I have worked with so far is a straightforward ASP.NET MVC app. If you were building a SPA, a single-page application, a lot's going on in the client. And you would need to replicate that into the client, which in this case will be your phone application. Whether you can build partial pages and inject those into your existing view, I mean, you certainly can. It's software. And so with enough determination, you can do virtually anything. But I'm not, at the moment, ready to give you step-by-step guidance on that. But that is something I will certainly be investigating and blogging about, because I think that's a really important issue as SPAs become increasingly important in the web world. So that was kind of a non-answer answer, except that I promise you I will be pursuing that.
Okay, thanks.
I think the two topics coming out of this conference that I'm most interested in pursuing is that one, taking SPAs and bringing them in, and also for web forms, pursuing custom renderers to extend the capabilities of web forms. Although Charles certainly, I don't know how many of you were here for Charles Petzold's presentation, but he presented some very interesting ways to stretch the capabilities of forms. But I digress. Yes, ma'am.
Can you handle JavaScript in the pages?
Yes, you can. You can have C# talking to JavaScript, and you can have JavaScript talking to C#. Those are done by virtually every platform in the same way, which is that when you want to talk to JavaScript, you're going to inject that JavaScript and then call it. And when you want your JavaScript to talk to C#, you're going to use a prefix on your URL. You're going to intercept that call, look for that prefix. If it's not there, pass it on. If it is there, take what follows as a method call. Yes, sir.
The techniques that you gave look like they have a lot of applicability in moving from hybrid, just standard hybrid mobile, say, PhoneGap, into the Xamarin world. Is there any major differences, any gotchas that we should look at if we're moving there?
Again, it's early days. And this process was developed, I believe, completely by Joseph Hill, who's one of the founders of Xamarin. I don't think we are looking at necessarily the final release. And as we acquire, or certainly as I acquire more experience with it, I'm going to be looking for those best practices. We tried to capture what we know about the best practices into this presentation, but this is still a relatively new idea to be able to reach out to a Razor application, an MVC application, and bring that into Xamarin. So those best practices, I think, will be evolving. There's another good non-answer answer. But again, it's fairly early days. I mean, if you think about it, it's actually fairly early days on some levels for Xamarin altogether, and certainly for bringing in these applications. But thank you. It's a really good question. Yes, sir?
Does it has to be an ASP.NET application, or can it be a Sencha Touch or jQuery application? For
Worse than that. It has to be an MVC application, or at least an application that uses Razor.
Okay.
Because the syntax that we're using, that we're migrating, is the Razor syntax. Now, that's not 100% true, because we can intercept those JavaScript to C# calls. But to do this very simple approach of migrating directly and copying directly, it would need to be an MVC Razor application. If you wanted to extend that to something else, you'd be writing a good bit more code.
Okay, thanks.
There's a library that Xamarin provides, assumes you're coming from an MVC Razor application.
Okay.
More questions? Yeah. Yes, sir.
Hi. So could you elaborate a little bit on the difference between you building an ASP.NET Razor website and using like standard HTML5 cache manifest capabilities to get the site loaded on the phone, and then just running the application using the cache manifest? We have been doing this for 2 years in my company. We've been building and maintaining a fairly big and complicated hybrid, like using this hybrid strategy. We made an application like this.
Yes,
so
if I understand you,
the difference between that and what you just showed.
Yes, if I understand you, what you're saying is it's been possible for the last couple of years to use the web viewer to just look at and interact with and bring in an HTML5 application. And how is that different from what we're doing here?
Yeah, what are the advantages you get from doing what you've just shown compared to the other?
The advantage here is that rather than simply using a web viewer and presenting a mobile application on your phone, what you're doing here is building a native mobile application.
Yeah.
So you're bringing in the CSHTML, you're bringing in the model, but what you're building is a Xamarin native application. And what's going to be emitted are native controls, and you're going to be much more able to reach out to platform-specific functionality in a way that you can't through a browser.
But your views is still HTML and CSS and JavaScript, right? So that would be the same as showing a website, right?
It would be the same code, but you're bringing that code into a Xamarin application, and what you're using for your functionality is C# and Xamarin. Rather than just opening a browser and displaying the existing application, you're migrating that into an application that's running inside Xamarin. And so you've gone from a HTML application to a Xamarin application, reusing the code you had.
Yeah.
I hope that's answering your question.
Yeah, maybe we can talk afterwards.
Okay, that would be great. Any other questions? I got two. Great. Yes, sir.
Any App Store issues?
Any
App Store, like Apple issues?
No.
In terms of, because you could have dynamic content, right? You could change after submission.
What you're building when you're done is a Xamarin application. It's going to compile down to either an iOS app or an Android app or a WinPhone app, and the App Store is going to recognize it as a legitimate iOS app. So I foresee no problems with presenting that to the App Store.
Right. Okay. Awesome.
Yes, sir.
Slightly different from what you've been talking about, but for a hybrid application, you've been talking a lot about MVC, but do you have any recommendations for an Mvvm framework for a hybrid application?
Once you've brought your application into Xamarin, we're starting with an MVC application. MVC and MVVM are fairly close. One of the things that I'm hoping to explore in coming weeks is, now that I have an MVC application that's inside Xamarin, how can I add, and I know I can with another PCL, how can I add Xamarin Forms, which lends itself more cleanly to an MVVM application? And it may be that what you're going to want to do is bring this in as an MVC application and then migrate the logic and the views into Xamarin Forms to be able to support your MVVM architecture and also to give you a more native experience. So this is both a great way to bring your MVC application into a mobile application, but it's also potentially a great stepping stone to move it into a Xamarin application, and in my opinion, particularly a Xamarin Forms application.
Due to the nature of the project we're working on,
could you come a little to the closer?
Due to the nature of the project we're working on, we're really locked into a hybrid application, because one of the platforms we have to support is not going to be supported by Xamarin Forms.
Okay.
So we're stuck with the hybrid.
Well, you can bring that hybrid into Xamarin, and then if you don't want to use Xamarin Forms, you could certainly create a PCL and migrate that into a pair of or a set of native applications. So there is a migration path. It may be that you have so much code that you're going to end up staying in a hybrid app. And then I'm not sure that the differences between MVC and MVVM are that significant that you couldn't. For example, in Angular, often you'll define your controller using the controller as syntax and treat it as a view model. And here, I think you could very much do a parallel thing where you treat your controller as if it were a view model class. Because really, it's doing the same thing. It's doing the logic. It's talking to the data. It's manipulating that data and giving it to the presentation layer.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
So you presented a scrolling application with the images.
Yes.
How is the performance for large amounts of images?
Well, because you're bringing it into Xamarin, the performance is excellent.
Okay.
On scrolling, yes, on large amounts. Now, I have to say to you that answer, although I feel confident about it, is more theoretical than experiential, because I have not added 100,000 images and scrolled it yet. But that is a great idea, and I will do that the minute I get home, and I will post about it.
Okay.
So watch for my blog, because I will definitely do that. I think that's a great idea.
And you mentioned Angular. Is there any intention to see how Angular plays with the Razor View?
I have the great luxury of not working for Xamarin, so I can speculate freely. What the folks from Xamarin say whenever you ask about, is there any intention to do X, is the more sensible it is, and the more you look around and see other people wanting it, the more likely it is somebody's working on it. I kind of take them at their word. And my experience so far has been, every time I say, boy, it would really help if you had a blank, either they're working on that blank or it comes out in the next release. As for Angular itself, I think I don't see that path, personally, not speaking for Xamarin. I don't see a direct path. I do think that SPA is becoming very, very, very important in the web world. And to the extent that that Xamarin is bringing in MVC applications, I can imagine addressing the issue of partial pages. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
Okay, great. Yes, sir.
Quick question. Is there a way to take the external resources such as JavaScript, CSS, everything else that was in that page and have that be local as well, so you're not actually needing to call out to the internet for any of that stuff? So really you're serving up 100% of the content from your phone?
Yes, absolutely. If you don't have a need to go out to the internet, it's 100. The application that I just showed you running on my phone does not talk to the internet until it wants to go and tweet.
What about all the JavaScript stuff that you had in the head file, the head section?
The CSHTML is local. The JavaScript can be spoken to from the C# locally. The controllers are local, and in this case, the database was local. So it was a totally disconnected application.
So the jQuery reference and everything came from a local embedded resource?
Well, by the time it's inside my mobile application, the only jQuery that was being used was the jQuery mobile for the CSHTML, and that was inside the application, yes.
Okay, thanks.
So thank you very, very much. This is a very big room, and you were very kind to help me try to fill it and to go through this presentation. And I hope you had as great a conference as I did. I thought that this was an extraordinary conference. Thank you so much.